Hey guys, I hope you all are doing well. Sorry we can't meet tonight, and I hope and pray that we'll be able to meet together again soon. But for the time being, we're going to be doing some more stuff online, and so we're going to try something a little different tonight for Bible class. We're going to try to meet, this way, doing a video on YouTube, and I've got some questions I'm going to be sending to your parents, and you guys can kind of work together on this. Be sure that after you watch this video, shoot me a text message to let me know what you think, and if you have any ideas about things that we can do in the future while we're kind of doing some more stuff online, let me know. So, have you guys ever felt like you're trapped or you're in a really bad situation? Maybe you felt afraid for your safety, or that you've been abandoned, or that whatever normal is, it's somehow not what it should be. I think right now we can probably all say yes to that, because in the midst of all this pandemic nonsense, we can kind of relate to that. But we're going to look at 3 short stories that are all kind of packed together really tight in Matthew chapter 8, starting in verse 23 and going through the early part of chapter 9. So in verses 23 through 27, there's this really short story where Jesus and his disciples, they get into a boat. And there is this really big storm, but Jesus is asleep. Now this reminds me of another story in the Old Testament where there is a man of God and he is asleep in a boat during a storm, Jonah. And of course, in that story, Jonah gets pitched into the ocean and eaten by a fish. But in this story, something different happens. The people on the boat, the disciples, go to Jesus and they wake him up and they ask him, or they tell him, "Save us, Lord. We are perishing. We're dying here, man. What are you doing? Wake up!" And he says to them, kind of waking up, and he looks at them and he goes, "Why are you afraid? I mean, Jesus, we're only on a boat and we're going to get swamped and we're going to all drown and die. That's the only reason we're worried." But Jesus, he says, "Why are you afraid? Oh, you of little faith," which is a really interesting response. Here Jesus is, he's just chilling out, relaxing in the middle of a potentially deadly storm. He's relaxing during a crisis. And I think part of that is designed to show Jesus' faith, that he understands that no matter the situation, things are going to be okay. But he rebukes the winds and the waves, and it all just stops. It completely stops. And the people that are with him are just kind of like, their minds are blown that, like, this guy just told the wind to chill out and it did. That's just totally wild. And so they end up landing the boat in this place near this city called Gadara, or near the country of the Gadarenes, as some translations will say. And in this version of the story, Matthew's retelling, there are 2 demon-possessed men that roll up, and they leave the tombs that they were living in, and they're going to prevent anybody from getting by them. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. And they start begging Jesus, and this is interesting. They start asking him, what do you have to do with us, Son of God? And why have you come here to torment us? So they're assuming that Jesus is there to torment them, and they understand who Jesus is, which is pretty cool. Now Jesus, he doesn't really answer these questions, but they start to beg him, if you are going to cast us out, please cast us into those pigs over there. And Jesus just looks at them and he says, "Go." And the demons leave and go into the pigs, and the pigs, this is Andrew's favorite part of the story, the pigs run off the cliff and into the water, and they all drown and die, which is just a wild image to think of. But there are these men that see this, and they run back to the city and they tell everybody what's happened. And the people of the city show up and they ask Jesus, like, "Hey man, you have got to leave. Like, we can't we can't have you around here, which is really interesting because here this guy is, he shows up, he casts demons out of these two guys, he heals these two guys. He clearly has power, but their concern is not with this guy, who this guy is, or what he can do, or how he has helped others. Their concern is for the economic interests of the pigs that they just lost. They care more about the pigs than they do about, or they care more about those pigs than they do about these people or Jesus, which is pretty troubling. So Jesus, he obliges and he leaves. And so he ends up getting into his boat and goes over to this other city. And when he gets there, people show up and they bring to him this paralyzed guy on a bed, like a little cot. They bring it over to him. And Jesus says that he sees their faith. Not the faith of the man, but the faith of the people that are carrying the man. So he sees their faith, and he says to the paralytic, the guy on the cot, he says, "Take heart, my son, your sins are forgiven," which is pretty cool. But the people that are around Jesus, these scribes, these experts in the law, they get really upset. They lose their mind over this, and they're like freaking out, and they're saying this guy's blaspheming, and they're saying all kinds of stuff. And Jesus, he knows what they're thinking. And he asks me, he goes, "What do you think is easier? For me to say your sins are forgiven, or rise up and walk? What would be easier?" And so he looks at the guy on the bed and he goes, "Pick up your bed and walk." And suddenly that guy is healed. And imagining just Jesus, like he just looks back over at the scribes like, And he does this to show that he has the authority to forgive sins. And it says that the crowd went on their way glorifying God. So we've got the story of the guys in the boat during the storm. The story of the guys that were demon possessed, that Jesus, he casts the demons out of them. And then we get the paralyzed guy who has his sins forgiven and is given the ability to walk. Now we could draw a lot from these lessons. About faith during a crisis. We could learn about our priorities, putting God before economic motives or concerns, or even like putting the well-being of others before those kinds of things. We could learn about letting our faith be seen through our actions, which I think would be a really good lesson. But let's look at the big picture. What do these three stories have in common? All three of these stories show that Jesus has power. In the first story, he has power over the natural world. In the second story, he has power over the spiritual world. And in the third story, he actually shows both, but he shows them on an individual level. And so Jesus has power over things big and small, physical and spiritual, personal and communal. Whatever the problem is that we have, Jesus has it. He's got this. And sometimes, when we're in the middle of a troubling time, we call out to Jesus. And, sometimes those problems are resolved pretty quickly. Sometimes it takes time for these things to work their way out. Sometimes, they resolve all on their own, and sometimes we have to work our way through them. But in the case of all these stories, we see that in the first story, the disciples, they ask Jesus for help, and he helps them. With the story of the demon-possessed men, the demons want to be thrown into the pig. The man himself, we don't really know what he wants. He doesn't really get to ask for anything because he's possessed. But Jesus helps him anyway. Or the demon-possessed men. There's two of them. And in the last story, the friends are bringing this man to Jesus. And, that guy, he had to have been paralyzed for a long time. He had to wait for Jesus to show up. And he needed help to get to Jesus. So, there's not a one-size-fits-all kind of rule about when we call out to God and how he's going to help us. Sometimes God, He's going to help us right away, and sometimes God is going to wait for some action on our part that we need to have some skin in the game, and sometimes God's going to say, hey, you're just going to have to be patient and wait. But the thing is that when we call out to God, God hears us and He cares. And it doesn't matter if it's a personal, individual problem. It doesn't matter if it's a communal problem, like, I don't know, a global pandemic. God hears and God cares, and whatever it is, He's got it. All right, guys, I hope that you are having a wonderful Wednesday, a wonderful rest of the week, and I hope to see you again soon. Again, I've got some questions. They are in the comment section below if you want to kind of look over those. And be sure, again, go to your parents and talk to them about what you've learned here in Matthew 8, verse 23 through chapter 9, verse 8. And then when you do that, shoot me a text and let me know that you did. All right, guys, have a great night. I love you, and I miss you guys, and I can't wait to see you again soon.